Hi, today I'm going to show you how I would typically cut steak or any kind of tough meat using my ability hand. We have a few different tools to do this. So what you would typically get at a restaurant, so just a fork and like a serrated steak knife. And then I also have a meat carving fork and a non-serrated larger knife. So we are going to go over how to do this, or how I typically do this, using those different tools, and then also a few different strategies with my hand. So first technique, both of them will be in key grip. So key grip is having my thumb pressing against my index. And before I get into these different techniques, I found it really helpful to make sure that my key grip is super tight. And what I mean by that is you can go into the PSYONIC app, so on your phone, and tighten up each grip. So you can tighten up the flexion of your fingers. And so what that means is I would tighten up or increase the flexion of my thumb against my index finger to make sure that it's pressing really tightly. So that way, once I'm holding either the fork, or if you want to hold the knife, or the carving fork, you are holding it really tight and it's not going to fall. So that's something that I would do. It's a little bit different with each hand, but what overall increasing the flexion so that you have a really tight key grip. So I'm going to start with this big piece of steak. And steak is a good example for cutting tough foods, just because in the community of people that wear prosthetics or people that have limb differences, it is a typical task that makes a lot of people really nervous. It used to make me really nervous, and I would never order steak at a restaurant out because I didn't know how to cut it by myself. So to start, first technique is holding the fork in my ability hand and having it kind of in line with my index finger here, like this. So again, my thumb, I'm in key grip, and my thumb is pressing hard against the fork against my index finger. And then, since I manually rotate my wrist, I like to find a wrist rotation that feels good, feels like I can stab the piece of meat, and I can still see what I'm doing, which is really important. So we're going to start over here, just holding it down. And it's also really useful to have a fork, if you can pick the forks that you buy at home when you're doing this, that have a thicker handle, because that's easier for your hand to grab onto. So I'm going to stab the piece of meat. I'm going to just start by cutting. Okay, so for these next few cuts, because they're a little bit tougher, I'm going to switch over to a different technique. So what I was doing before was just holding the fork in between my index and my thumb. Now what we're going to actually do is wedge the fork in between my index and my middle finger. And I found, because of the compliance of the fingers, the hand allows me to do this, and then I can press down on my index to get an even stronger grip. And this is great because this wedges that fork in between those fingers, and then I'm also pressing down, and it keeps my fork in place, as opposed to if it wasn't wedged, my hand could kind of slip because of the silicone material over time. So we are going to do this. The bone is also, we're getting to the bone part of the steak, so this is going to be helpful. And then also, again, because I manually rotate my wrist, I'm going to rotate it so that I can still see, so I still have visibility of what I'm doing, but I still have, I'm pressing down firmly in this direction. So let's continue on. And again, you might want to readjust until you get that perfect angle, but as you can see, I'm wedging. There we go. Do some diagonal cuts because of the bone, but that. Again, wedging the handle. So as you can see, I have to experiment a little bit with different fork positions and readjusting. That's super normal in learning how to do it, and then also in cutting in practice, because you're going to have bone in your steak and have to work around in different ways. And then also with the hand, you just are going to have to wedge it in different positions until you get the most secure position, so that the hand isn't slipping and you have a sturdy hold on your cutting utensil. So again, I'm just readjusting to make sure I have my handle wedged in between those two fingers, and then trying to position the end of the handle in between the thumb and my palm so that I have the sturdiest hold. But again, you're going to have to experiment with different positions. Again. Okay, now I'm going to switch over from a serrated knife and fork like you would get at a restaurant, and I'm going to use now a carving fork and a non-serrated knife. So if I was to do this at home like I am now. So again, you want to get your thumb and index around the handle of that carver, and you can use your other hand to help push it in if that's helpful. And again, tightening that grip to make it a little bit tighter when I'm holding it is really useful. And I'm going to cut this in a little bit of a funky way because of the bone in the steak, but this is how I hold it down. Okay. Piece up to the side. And I'm just going to keep cutting the steak using this technique until I get to the end. Now I'm going to repeat this process using both techniques for the next piece of steak. All right, now on to our next piece of steak. I'm going to switch back over to kind of restaurant style, so fork and knife, wedging the fork in between my index and my middle finger, and then trying to wedge the end of the handle so that I have a good sturdy grip. And this just gives me a really sturdy hold on the fork. And then again, manually rotating my wrist so that I have a very good vantage point of what I'm doing. And I might want to position while I'm, cutting. And then just, maybe adjusting my wrist a little bit more as I'm going. Just going to repeat this process throughout the rest of the steak. And now I'll switch over to my other tools, the carving fork and non-serrated knife. stabbing the meat and using my other hand to make the cuts. All right. I think it's important to mention that there's a lot of different factors that go into being able to cut tough food successfully, and a lot of little tips and tricks to make it a little bit easier. So whether that is having just sharper knives, or like I said, increasing the tightness of your grips, the position that your wrist is rotated at, having your utensil wedged perfectly, finding that perfect position. And even there are grippy materials that you can buy that you can put under your cutting board that make sure it doesn't move around or slip. So there's a lot of different things that you can use to make cutting tough foods a little bit easier. And that's how I cut tough foods such as steak using my ability hand.